Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of Minecraft Myth Busting. This episode's myth is one I already know the answer to because a few episodes ago we covered hydrated farmland affecting the growth rate of crops. After I made this video I asked Ryan to check the game code to make sure, and he discovered something very interesting. When the crop is selected at random by the game, it will do a check for other crops of the same type around it. Now if the game finds any in the diagonal blocks, it will halve the growth rate of that crop. It will also halve the growth rate if there are any crops in both the X and the Z axis, but if there are only crops in the same axis then the growth rate will not be affected. So what does this mean? Growing crops in rows is twice as fast as growing them in a square patch. Now some of you may be thinking this is common knowledge and some of you wouldn't have known, but the reason I decided to make this video is because there are actually some popular videos out there saying that growth rate isn't affected by the crop formation, which the game code would suggest is false. So it's time for us to do a time lapse and put this to the test. So like last time I have used MCEdit to analyse the growth stages of each of these crops, and here are the results. The crops in a square are blue and the crops in rows are red, and you can clearly see the positive effect of growing crops in rows. Now one thing to consider is that the total amount of crops in rows is half of what's in squares, so if there were the same amount of crops in total, that chart would look something like this, which means if you are looking for fast growth you should be growing your crops in rows, which isn't as space efficient. However, as I mentioned earlier, the game will check for crops of the same type around it, so this means that you could grow crops in a square if you alternate the crop type from row to row. So we are going to do one last test to confirm that this is true, and this time we will skip the time lapse. I have a simple test. We have two square patches, one of wheat and one of carrots, and on this side we have two square patches of the same crops in alternate rows, and like before we will let this test run for 25 minutes. I don't think we need a graph to tell us what's going on here. Clearly growing crops in alternate rows like this is the faster way to do it. As I mentioned earlier, they will grow twice as fast, and we have just shown this works with alternate rows of crops too. Now if you are interested in seeing the extract of the game code, check the description box for a link, and a big thanks to Ryan for sharing this information with us. But that is it for this episode. If you have enjoyed it, please do leave a like, it will always be appreciated, and be sure to check out these commonly requested myths that I have already covered if one of them interests you. But as always, thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.